During a British conference a few years back, held with religious experts from around the world, during the conference they were discussing many topics, but one of the topics they were discussing, well, what makes Christianity unique? Is there anything about Christianity that makes it different than any of the other faiths that we have? And they said, well, maybe it's the incarnation. God coming to be with us in the form of His Son. But they said, no. Many other faiths have the story of God's coming to be in human form. It's not the incarnation. Well, maybe it's the resurrection. And they debated that for a while. And they said, no, other faiths have stories of people returning from the dead. And they were going on, but then the theologian C.S. Lewis walked in the room. He said, hey, what's all the rumpus about? And they explained to him, we're trying to just figure out if there's anything different and unique about Christianity than any other faiths that we have. And C.S. Lewis said, oh, that's easy. It's grace. It's grace. After some discussion, all the conferees agreed. You know, the notion that God would come to us without any strings attached, without any ulterior motive, seems to go against every instinct we have as human beings. You know, it feels like whatever we earn, we need to work for. You know, we have the saying, oh, nothing is free. Well, grace is free. But we have a hard time accepting it. It just doesn't fit with our way of being. And only Christianity dares to make God's love unconditional and free for the taking. But aware of our resistance, our human resistance to grace, Jesus often talked about it in stories. And he sees a world filled with grace. A world where the birds don't toil or put up in barns, but yet God takes care of them. A world where the flowers on the hillside grow just because God sends His rain on them. A world where God sends His grace and mercy on the evil and on the good. A world just filled with grace. And like a visitor from another land, He comes and sees in our world what we, the locals, are unable to see. And Jesus never used the word grace, never defined it, but He told so many stories about it. And in the stories we find grace and ourselves experience grace. And one of His stories, Jesus talks about God's grace being like a lovesick father who runs to. The story of the prodigal son. And Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, Father, give me my share of this estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went out and hired himself to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. And he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, wait a minute. How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. No, not me. Make me like one of your hired men. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son. Ran to his son. Threw his arms around him and kissed him. If you ask people, what do you have to do to get into heaven? They will often say, well, just be kind enough. Just be generous enough. Just be good enough. But Jesus contradicts all this, says, no. All you have to do is cry out for help. cried out to God for help. Because God welcomes anyone and everyone who will come to him. In fact, God took the first step and he came for us. You know, a lot of times the doctors or the lawyers or those people of reputation will wait for people to come see them and make appointments with them. But it's God who came for us. You know, but too long we have exhibited this waiting for God kind of grace. We who have experienced grace sit in our pews, sit in our churches, our sanctuaries, waiting for people to come to a point in time in their lives they feel like they need to be graced. And for some years they came, but then they didn't come so often. Then they didn't come at all. And then we're left with the options. Well, do we continue to wait for them to come to us, or compelled by God's grace who is changing us, do we go to them? You know, the religious philosopher Soren Kierkegaard sort of puts his finger on Jesus' parables, and he speaks about these stories. They're not just stories that have a good meaning or stories that have like different biblical truths. He said, no, these are stories about Jesus. These are templates for Jesus' life. It was Jesus who was the shepherd who went out to find the lost sheep. It was Jesus who welcomed the tax collectors and the prostitutes, those people no one else would want to be with or even invite to anything. It was Jesus who was the father on the side of the hill waiting for his son to come home for him. It is Jesus who came for the sick. I want you to hear this. It came for the sick, not the well. Jesus who came for the unrighteous, not the righteous. Jesus who, even when his disciples betrayed him in the hour that he needed his disciples the most, it is Jesus who is like the lovesick father who runs. Grace is God running to us. Because of God's compassion for us. For notice how this reads. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was what? Was filled with what? Compassion. Compassion for him. You know, as I look around our nation, our world, this is a quality I feel like our world is lacking right now. Is compassion. Compassion for the hurting. Compassion for those who are in need. Compassion even for ourselves. And this word compassion means literally from the depths of one bowels, for they believe that it's from the depth of the inside that pity and love were experienced. And so here's this father being moved to the depths of his being out of compassion, out of love for his son, to the point that he ran. And when you have compassion for somebody, you cannot help but run to them. You can't help yourself but want to help them. You can't help yourself but desire to make their life a little bit easier for them. And day by day, as we are spiritually transformed to the depths of our being by God, his compassion becomes our compassion. And God's compassion becomes our compassion, and we can't help but love others. And as God's compassion becomes our compassion, we instinctively run to them, love them, seek to help them. Through us, God goes after the lost sheep. Through us, God seeks after the lost coins. Through us, God loves those sons who come back to him. God is the love-sick Father. But we can only have God's compassion, truly know God's compassion, if God's compassion first has us. Yesterday, I had a And really incredible encounter. At McDonald's. Now, it wasn't the Happy Meal. It wasn't the Big Mac. I was sitting there watching our grandson Levi play in the playground. And another gentleman comes in, sit down, watching his son. I thought it was son, play. And they're about the same age. Levi is about 2.5. This other little guy's name ended up the crew is 2.5. They were playing and laugh along. And then I asked them, say, hey, are you dad? He said, no, I'm not dad, I'm uncle. And then the conversation went on, explained why he was there. But the time we came to the end of our conversation, he was, and I don't know how we got there all the way, but he was telling me that he had been far from God. Been so far from God because of things that have happened in his life. In fact, he said, my father was a minister. But he says, I'm trying to find my way back. It was such an incredible moment, me with him and talking and on a spiritual deep level. I did not expect it, did not be there. But because I was prepared for that day and prayed that morning, Jesus, help me be someone to you today. The opportunity presented itself. Grace is God's running to us. It's God's compassion for us, because only grace can bring foundness out of lostness. And the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. Why? For the Son of Mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. When something seems to be too good to be true, we think there's a catch. Where's the rub here? What's going on here? There's something that, but there's no small print, no loophole in God's grace. Each parable has something similar about it that Jesus tells. It's about the pain of the one who loses. It's about the joy of something lost being found. And it's about the amazing celebration party that happens afterwards. See, this is the third of 3 parables Jesus tells. The parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, and now the parable of the lost son. And they all say the same thing. And Jesus says, do you know what it is to feel like God feels? It is to have one of these 2-legged human beings who I thought was far from me and lost, actually began to seek me and open their hearts and their lives and to explore the possibility of maybe even loving me. A few years back, I was getting ready to go to work, and I ran to the cubbyhole. My cubbyhole has my keys, my wallet, my rings, change. Does anyone else have a cubbyhole? You know what I'm talking about, cubbyhole? I got blank stares going on here. Cubbyhole. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, it's that thing when you get older like me, so to make sure you don't lose anything, you always, as soon as you walk in the door, you put it in your cubbyhole. All right, now for me, my cubbyhole is it holds paper. It's a paper holder. It's a paper tray. I just throw it in there and keep on going. So I was getting ready to go to work, and I ran to my cubbyhole, and I grabbed my wallet, grabbed change, stuff like that, and I grabbed my rings. Well, I had my college ring, but I didn't have my wedding ring. Oh, not a good day. No good, very bad day happening here. No wedding ring. And I had to get to work, I had an appointment I had to make, so I went on to work and got there and finished day, but I didn't feel right. I was out of sorts. It wasn't, something was missing. The ring which signifies my wife's love for me. So I got home that afternoon, went right to my cubbyhole, looked in it 3, 4, 5 times, turned it over, looked under it, around it, beside it, on top of it, below it, no wedding ring. Looked in the living room, the bedroom, under the beds, in the dog dish. Looked outside, in the sink, in the bathrooms, looked everywhere, no wedding ring. Went to work, came home, same thing again. Looked at bedrooms, the bathroom, the living room, under the couch, everywhere. No wedding ring. Okay, I told Carol. Okay, I wasn't trying to hide it. I told Carol so she could help me look for it. But 2 weeks later, Carol said, hey, I found something. It's my wedding ring. I said, where was it? She said it was the ashtray of the car. I had been working on her car and trying to do some things in there, and for some reason I'd taken off my wedding ring and left it in the ashtray of the car. You have no idea. Yeah, it's not a good place for a wedding ring. I know. I wasn't trying to get rid of it. Okay, I just left it there. But the joy, the relief, I was almost more happy to get my wedding, for Carol to get my wedding ring back in that moment than I was the first time she gave it to me. And that's just a taste of what it must be like for parents who receive a call from the police telling them that their 16-year-old daughter who'd been abducted has been found, and she's alive and unharmed. It's mom and dad, the Army comes to visit, knocking at the door, telling them, hey, there's been a serious mistake. We come to say we're sorry. Your husband was not on that downed helicopter after all. And these just are small glimpses of what it must be like for God to get when his children come back to him. His children who have been created for a relationship with him begin to make their way back home to him. And Jesus even says, in the same way I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Professor Henry Nouwen describes it like this: God rejoices not because the problems of the world have been solved, not because all human pain and suffering have come to an end, not because thousands of people have been converted and are now praising him for his goodness. No, God rejoices because just one of his children who was lost has been found. For this son, this daughter of mine was dead and is alive again. She was lost and is found. I read the story of a pastor who he and his wife had a very challenging 16-year-old teenage daughter. They knew she was taking birth control. She was staying out all night. A lot of nights she never came home. And they tried various forms of punishment and counseling and dealing with her, but nothing seemed to change. She always stood back on them. Well, if you had not been so strict on me, if you had not been so tough on me, I wouldn't be this way. It's your fault. But he shares these words as he says, I remember standing before the plate glass window in my living room, staring out into the darkness, waiting for her to come home. I felt such rage. I wanted to be like the father of the prodigal son, yet I was furious with my daughter for the way she would manipulate us and twist the knife to hurt us. And of course, she was hurting herself more than anyone. I understood the passage in the prophets expressing God's anger. The people knew how to wound him, and God cried out in pain. And yet I must tell you, when my daughter came home that night, or rather the next morning, I wanted nothing in the world so much as to take her into my arms, to love her, and to tell her I wanted the best for her. I was a helpless, lovesick father. When I think about God, I think about a lovesick father. When I think about God, I think about this minister who's waiting, looking out at the window for his daughter to come home. When I think about God, I think about him waiting on the side of the hillside, hurting, longing, praying for that moment when he could announce with joy, this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He is found. And they celebrate. And maybe this morning, this grace of God is finding you. All you have to do is confess the sins of your past, receive his forgiveness in your present, and give your life as a disciple to follow him into your future. Confess in the past, forgiveness in the present, your life to live for Jesus in the future. Open your hands and your arms and be graced and be found.